Here are some of the headlines we are featuring today from your favorite news outlets at offthepress.com. As the national debt continues to grow under President Biden, the rate of borrowing is starting to scare fiscal hawks. A new report from the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget just revealed that the president has to borrow $63,000 a second and $2 trillion a year to cover the nation's debt. The Secret Service's inability to figure out who left cocaine near the Situation Room continues to bewilder Washington. Former President Donald Trump said he thinks they are being muzzled from telling the truth. And it turns out the agency didn't even ask first son Hunter about the drugs. Tucker Carlson got his first big ad deal for his new Twitter show. It's a $1 million buy from an anti-ESG app. And number 1 ranked Carlos Alcaraz defeated number 2 ranked Novak Djokovic over 5 sets Sunday at Wimbledon. For stories like these and more updates all day long from your favorite news outlets, go to offthepress.com.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Stinchfield. I'm going to make a prediction here that the Democrats are going to stand in the way of passing the National Defense Authorization Act. Democrats in the United States Senate. Here's why. The Freedom Caucus in the House did a fabulous job of passing a decent bill that, for the most part, strips a lot of the woke ideology, the transgender ideology, the critical race theory, the diversity, equity, and inclusion theory out of the military. See, the Democrats in the Senate aren't going to like that. So, though we passed it through the House and now it goes to the Senate, we shall see what happens. But this bill is important because it does provide for some pay raises for troops, which will make recruitment a lot easier. It will allow us to build more ships, supply the military with more F-35s, the planes that we so desperately need. Remember, China is outpacing us when it comes to Navy and the Air Force, and it will also allow us to stockpile and restockpile, I should say, weapons and ammunition. Here is Congressman Bob Good explaining why this bill is important.
The purpose of the military is to be the most effective, lethal, fighting and killing machine so that no one wants to challenge us on the planet. That was the case before this administration. But this administration, as soon as they got in office, told our military that the purpose of the military was to fight climate, that climate was the greatest threat to the country. And then right behind that, the greatest threat to the military was racism in the military.
Well, we all know that that is not the greatest threat to the military, racism and the climate. The greatest threat to the military right now is a commander-in-chief who is a serious, if not the most serious, national security threat we face, because he and the rest of the Democrats fail to realize who our enemies really are. Climate change is not the enemy. China is, Russia is, North Korea is, and the list goes on. You know, the greatest military reforms that we could make right now, surprisingly, wouldn't cost us any money, provided we had a new commander-in-chief. How about poorly defined priorities? This has been a problem with multiple administrations, not the Trump administration, but multiple administrations before that, and clearly the Biden administration. They don't know what they're doing or where they're headed. It has been a long time since the United States ever got itself involved in a war that it was willing to win. I would argue not since World War II did we fight a war that we were actually willing to win and allowed our troops to do what's necessary to win. This administration, the military now, has an inability to execute, partly because of those poorly defined priorities, partly because of just plain old bad management, and they're focusing more on the woke agendas than they are on winning battles. All you have to do is look at Afghanistan. You can see they don't know how to execute. And then, of course, there is a profound lack of understanding of who the real threat is. I talked about China, talked about North Korea while they talk about climate change. Just look at Ukraine when it comes to our priorities and not spelling out how to fix the problem there, how to help Ukraine there. They don't know what the hell they're doing. Here's Republican from Ohio, State Representative Warren Davidson.
Well, we got to put our country first. And if we're going to spend money, we should at least demand a mission. And $300 million is a small change. And in fact, before this bill could even make it through the Senate, before appropriations could even come up, they could draft a mission. They could draft a mission today. Unless we demand that mission, how do we hold them accountable for not growing and expanding it? We must demand a mission.
They're not going to give you a mission because they don't know what the mission is there. This whole fiasco with cluster bombs, which once they call an act of war, now they're supplying them to Ukraine, ticking off Vladimir Putin, who then says he's going to use nuclear weapons. And by the way, he's not going to use nuclear weapons. Don't believe that hype, because all they want to do is use that to get us to invest more money in Ukraine. And you see how the circle goes round and round. Now, here's what they do have an overwhelming focus on when I talk about the Biden administration and those on the left. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Critical race theory. These programs must be abandoned. Freedom Caucus members made sure that they would be pushing this bill to the United States Senate. The bottom line is we need ships. We need lots of them. China is outpacing us, far outpacing it when it comes to building up their Navy. We need more F-35s and other fighter jets to keep up with technology and our enemies. But quite frankly, what we really need is common sense. We don't have any of it. It doesn't seem like any of our military leaders have any of it. We spend so much money on programs promoting racial equity and inclusion and awareness. They want to focus on carbon emissions, moving our military fleet to be a green fleet, all electric. We will get our butts cleaned in the next conflict that we ever go into if we're working with electric vehicles. They don't have the power, and we're not ready for that, yet they don't care. It's about an agenda, an all-out agenda. Listen to the Democrats. This is Jim McGovern.
The party of single-issue bills wants to turn the NDAA into an anti-abortion, anti-LGBTQ bill that weighs in on every wedge issue and culture war, from guns to border and beyond. Give me a break. If they want to do a single-issue bill, get this stuff out of here and pass a bipartisan NDAA bill. And by the way, I just want to say, I find some of the amendments that have been introduced to this NDAA incredibly offensive.
Yeah, what's offensive? That we want to do away with critical race theory in the military? That's offensive? You're telling me that a black soldier and a white soldier next to each other in a foxhole gives a rat's ass about critical race theory when they're defending their lives? No. The military may be the one place where race does not play a factor in America. It's about survival, it's about winning, and it's about fighting. Knock off the Democrat agenda of trying to use the military as a training ground for leftist activity. Did you know that right now our military, the infrastructure is so out of date? We've got ammunition depots that are literally falling apart. We've got bases falling apart. Our Navy shipyards, many of them are in disrepair. We need capital improvements. We need them now. This defense authorization bill would provide for that. One of the highest costs the military faces, we can thank the Biden administration. It's got nothing to do with the military. How about inflation? Did you know inflation costs us, when you look at fuel costs, $2 to $5 billion a year in fuel costs, $20 to $40 billion in other costs in the military alone because of inflation? We could get that under control with a Republican president, but Joe Biden doesn't want to do that. Our public debt now stands at $32 trillion. That is a drain on our resources. Everything suffers when we face that kind of public debt, including the United States military. This needs to be fixed outside of the NDAA, and yet Democrats, when they look at this bill, I think they fail to read it. This is Democrat Sarah Jacobs.
I am so incredibly disappointed that my Republican colleagues have hijacked this traditionally bipartisan bill to put in their wish list of far-right extreme at the expense of our service members. I represent San Diego, the biggest military community in the country. I can tell you that I am not getting phone calls from my constituents about drag shows. I'm not getting phone calls from my constituents about DEI. I'm getting phone calls from my constituents about the fact that they can't find or afford housing.
If you read the bill, Sarah Jacobs, maybe you could tell the people that are calling you that this is the biggest pay raise for troops in 2 decades that Republicans put in there. We've got a 5.2% pay raise next year alone under all of this. There's also a housing allowance raise that will be put into this bill. Do you not read it? Because while you're out there blasting and while the mainstream media is not pushing back on your lies, these are real benefits to our troops, and they will help when it comes to recruitment. So what is in this bill? How about travel for abortions? That's what the Biden administration wants to make sure that we keep. Gender affirmative care, the Biden administration wants to make sure we keep that. Hormone blockers and the like for members of our military. Surrogate mothers and sperm donation for same-sex couples. The Democrats in the Biden administration and the United States Senate are trying to make sure that stays in the bill. Remember, Biden is the one who allowed for transgender service members to remain in the military. This has not been allowed forever. And I will just tell you this when you go to the stats. Sadly, and this is sadly, transgender members of the military are 8 times more likely to commit suicide, and they're 9 times more likely to need mental health care. And then I would ask you, you pay for their gender reassignment surgery. Now are they combat ready? Or are they recovering from having their nuts chopped off? Sorry to be blunt about all of this, but I'm talking about a fighting force that needs to be ready, not carrying and icing down their private parts. Serious here. Not a joke, as Joe Biden likes to say. Yet this is what we get from John Kirby. He's an admiral, by the way.
Do you see the president signing a National Defense Authorization Act that limits transgender rights, that rips out diversity training, and does exactly the opposite of what you said the president supports when it comes to access to reproductive rights?
It's very difficult to see the president supporting legislation that would make it harder for Americans to serve in uniform and to not be able to do so with dignity, would not be able to do so with the proper care that they need, both medical and mental care. It's very difficult to see that the president would ever sign legislation that would put our troops at greater risk or put our readiness at risk.
How in the world did that clown become an admiral? But then I guess you could say the same question about that clown who serves in the White House. Well, joining me now is Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, who has a distinguished career in the United States military and the United States Congress. Colonel, it is great to see you. Does this outrage you as much as this? I can't believe we're even talking about this stuff when it comes to the United States military.
Well, Grant, it's good to be with you. And I was just up in Washington, D.C. last week for 3 days as they were preparing to go into that NDAA process, talking to a lot of my former colleagues and members of the House Armed Services Committee and also Foreign Relations Committee. And what this really comes down to is an incredible dichotomy of a choice. Either we're going to talk about military readiness or we're going to be funding leftist wokeness. And I think that we have to get back to military readiness. So let me give you a great case in point with this whole thing about funding travel for abortion. If I wanted to go and see one of my loved ones, maybe even a mother or father, brother and sister who was sick, I have to take my own personal leave to do that. And what the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, did by memo is a complete violation of the Hyde Amendment, saying that the United States military will not only give you free leave, that means it doesn't count against your days of leave that you have, but will also pay for your travel expenses, pay for any food or any of the other expenses you incur during this time period. And the other thing I want people to understand, I think we remember that picture of that overweight, gender dysphoric, suicidal United States Army major holding up the 2 rainbow flags. Well, if you are someone that is suffering from gender dysphoria, which is a mental condition, you can get an exemption from doing physical fitness testing. So in other words, that's part of the readiness of the military. You don't have to go out and take a physical fitness test. And you're right, when you think about the fact that we're allowing people with a mental condition with 8 times opportunity of committing suicide, when I used to put soldiers out for being overweight. You cannot join the military if you have flat feet. So all of this comes back to military readiness against leftist wokeism. And if Joe Biden wants to be on the side of wokeness in the military and degrading our military readiness, and that representative from California, let me tell you something. We have soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Guardians that are on food stamps. I think that's more important than worrying about having drag shows on our military bases.
What do you think Xi Jinping is thinking right now, the leader of China, as we watch the United States debate these issues, instead of literally saying, hey, we need more destroyers, we need more aircraft carriers, we need more F-35s?
Well, think about this. During the lead up to the National Defense Authorization Act, I believe it was the Chief of Naval Operations, testified saying that the United States Navy does not have enough amphibious assault shipping to move our United States Marine Corps. What's the #1 mission of the United States Marine Corps? Is to conduct amphibious assaults. Now let's look at what is happening in the Pacific, where China is building islands and fortifying them along the South China Sea, which is one of the major sea lanes of commerce. We can talk about them intruding upon the Senkaku Islands, also the Scarborough Shoals. And you already articulated the fact that they are outpacing us with their surface war fleet than our United States Navy. But guess what? Our United States Navy is talking about having drag queen recruiters. So what message does that send to Xi Jinping, to Vladimir Putin, to Iran, North Korea, and Islamic jihadists? Is that we're not serious about military readiness. The left has introduced all of this cultural and all this wokeism, and the American taxpayer should not be paying for the ideological agenda of the left in our military.
Whether the left likes it or not, it certainly hurts our military readiness when we start talking about this stuff, when we start arguing about all this stuff. Lieutenant Colonel Allen West, I'll ask you this final question. Everything I've watched the Biden administration do over the course of their tenure here seems to me that they're actively trying to destroy America. All of this nonsense seems to me like they just may be actively trying to destroy our United States military, to weaken it. Could that be the case?
No, there is no doubt that that's the case. As a matter of fact, the military has always been the target of the progressive socialist left, going back to the Obama administration, and this is just Obama's 3rd term. They have always seen the military as that last great bastion of values, standards, morals, honor, integrity, and character, and they wanted to break that down, and that's exactly what they're doing. And just think about what recently the Secretary of the Army, Christine Wormuth, said, is that she does not want to focus on families that have been through generations providing their young men and women to serve in the military as far as recruiting. She wants to recruit new people to come into the military. Now, that affects the West family because my father served in World War II, my older brother in Vietnam, my father-in-law also in Vietnam. I did 22 years myself, 3 combat tours, and my nephew is a lieutenant colonel right now with 3 combat tours. That's not what Christine Wormuth wants. She does not want generational patriotism.
Unbelievable. Well, a huge thank you to the West family, including yourself, Lieutenant Colonel Allen West. You know, we're forever grateful to your service. And so many families like yours out there that have that same type of history. I'm humbled to call myself an American because of people like you. Lieutenant Colonel Allen West, thank you, my friend.
My pleasure. Good to be with you, Grant.
Absolutely. Good to be with you. All right, folks, how upsetting is it that you literally watch the left try to destroy our United States military as they destroy the country? Well, coming up after the break, Turning Point USA, the Action Conference, held a poll on the Republican presidential candidates. And one candidate even got booed. We'll discuss the results and what they mean for the 2024 election with a former, I would even call him a current Trump advisor right now. Stick with us. You know, folks, I don't know what the answer to this question is anymore. What's worse, being a doctor in the United States or being a doctor in Canada? For a long time, I would have said Canada, but I don't know. United States has given us a run for our money. Here is a gentleman in Canada, a doctor, who is speaking out against the COVID-19 virus. He is now facing all kinds of medical persecution. He is a 25-year veteran inside the emergency room. His name is Mark Trozzi. He made it his mission to try to warn people about this vaccine. Here's some of them.
This medical intervention, is the best we could call it, has caused more death, more injury, more disability than any medical thing, I believe, in our history.
So because of that, medical boards everywhere are trying to kick this guy out from even practicing medicine. He's an outspoken guy, but all the research I've done on him, he's tried to back everything that he says up with science, like this.
So when I look back, for instance, at my trajectory, you know, by the end of 2020, when they were rolling out these injections, I read the ingredients. Of course, I read a lot more, but the ingredients was the foundational reason why the first thing I ever published was just, this is not a vaccine.
And it's not. And the experts would agree with that. Yet the Ontario Medical Board puts him on trial. And then our friend, Dr. Peter McCullough, goes to testify as an expert witness. But instead of interviewing Dr. Peter McCullough about the doctor's findings, they try to discredit Dr. McCullough and get him kicked out. Well, they fail to disqualify Dr. Peter McCullough. But really, it speaks to what we all are up against, people who want to seek the truth. Well, joining me now is that man who has now become internationally known as an expert, I believe, on the China virus and government overreach, is our friend Dr. Peter McCullough. Dr. McCullough, it's great to have you on the program.
Thanks for having me.
So what did they do to you? I know you go to testify on this gentleman's behalf. What was this like?
They put me through just grueling clip after clip of video material I've generated over the last, 3 years, Grant. There's over 25 million hits on me on the internet, probably tens of thousands of media clips. And, each one was evidence-based, and I went through it with them. I kept asking them, give me a substantive question regarding Dr. Trozzi. They couldn't do it. They finally brought up a few studies that made it clear the vaccines weren't safe and effective, and then they dropped it. Trozzi had his last day, I believe, in court today. He hasn't been able to practice in 6 months. He's a perfectly qualified doctor. They need him in the trenches in the ER in Ontario. They simply have tried to destroy his career, destroy his credibility, all to advance this vaccine agenda, and it's so wrong.
You know what I've noticed, Dr. McCullough, is that so many doctors who really dug into this vaccine, the China virus, were not necessarily specialists in virology. You've got ER docs, you've got heart doctors, but they felt the need because no one was serving the community that was asking questions. Is that a fair assessment?
It's true. We haven't really had any prominent virologists or vaccinologists come out and say, wait a minute. Now, I'm broad-based. I've chaired many data safety monitoring boards for the FDA, even BARDA. And, I was on the academic scene as a prominent physician. So I called it right away. I published an op-ed in The Hill in August of 2020 before the vaccines came out. It was titled The Great Gamble of the Vaccine Development Program. And I was the only public figure to question them ahead of time.
All right, and you've continued to find more and more evidence that this vaccine is not good. I saw an interview you did that there's some evidence out there, according to the interview I saw of you, that shows that cancer could be increased for those who take this vaccine?
This is very disturbing. We've seen now several reports, one by Singh and colleagues, University of Pittsburgh, showing that the S2 segment of the spike protein can interfere with tumor suppressor systems, P53 and BRCA. That was by modeling Now Kevin McKernan has examined 2 vials of Pfizer, 2 of Moderna, and he found in one of the sets of vials what's called fragments of DNA, cDNA, importantly, a cancer-promoting segment called SV40. So if this is true and that some of the vials are contaminated with DNA from the manufacturing process, this could be very bad news because people are taking injections every 6 months.
All right, so this seems to be a problem, and I want to make this clear. It may not be that the vaccines cause the cancer, but that they may be infected with something, the actual vaccine, or contaminated is a better word. We've seen this before. You said that there were many of the vials of these vaccinations that were contaminated. That's where the problems were. Is that correct?
It's true. The Japanese have returned millions of vials because of visible contaminants, and we had a paper by Schmeling and colleagues showing there's great variation from batch to batch in terms of side effects. About a third of vials, there's 0 side effects. It's like getting a shot of saline. About 2/3 having some moderate side effects, and then 4.2% having fatal blood clots, myocarditis. That looked to me like probably changes in concentration of messenger RNA. And now this report about cDNA being in the vials would explain some longer-term risks. Cancer is up in every single data system in the world. And the question is, are the vaccines playing a role?
Yeah, I mean, that's with so many things, including you mentioned myocarditis, and we see the athletes dropping over. Nobody can argue that athletes have not been dropping over at a much higher rate. No one can argue the cancer rates are up. The question is, what's causing it?
Right. That's true. We have an autopsy paper that's received a lot of attention. It was initially censored off the Lancet preprint server. Valid study that Lancet reviewed favorably, triaged it to a lower level journal. I respectfully decline. I'm the senior author. It's going to publish at a high level. This is 325 autopsies where we determined independently that 73.9% of the deaths were directly due to the vaccine. Lancet shut it down after 24 hours, getting surges of downloads. They said that the methods didn't support the conclusions, although they didn't tell us that at any point during the submission and review process. Now it's on the European Commission Zenodo server, Grant, and I can tell you what, a typical paper gets about 30 to 50 reads and downloads. We're at 140,000. Stunning uptake. The word is out. People know that deaths after the vaccine are, in fact, due to the vaccine.
To bring this interview full circle, Dr. McCullough, the Ontario Medical Board, I don't care what medical board, any medical board you go in front of, they must get so frustrated by you, even in this interview. Every time I interview you, you name the study, you name the doctor, you name what's in the study. You got it all down. What can these people say to you?
They wanted to stay away from any substantive questions, Grant. I think all of these medical boards are essentially trying to destroy people's lives and overlook the glaring evidence. The vaccines are not safe, not effective. The medical board should have never supported these. They should have taken a neutral position and observed the data as they came out.
Dr. McCullough, it's so great having you on, always. I know you jumped through hoops to get on with me tonight. I so greatly appreciate that. Where can people find you?
You can go to my website, petermcculloughmd.com. That'll take you everywhere. Courageous Discourse is my Substack. Red Hot Courage to Face COVID is the book. And then America Out Loud Talk Radio, McCullough Report, my podcast every Saturday and Sunday and through the week.
He is the most busiest doctor in America. Dr. Peter McCullough, I appreciate you coming on as always.
Thank you.
All right, absolutely. I'm telling you, his Substack is great too, by the way. I subscribe to it. I get the email updates. Fabulous. All right, folks, one thing that I take very seriously, seeing we just had a doctor on, Dr. McCullough knows this, I try to eat right. With my schedule, it's not always easy. I know that I need fruits and vegetables. It's like 6 cups a day or something. Who could do that, right? But I have a solution to all of this. I found Field of Greens. Field of Greens is amazing. It's easy and it tastes great. Unlike other fruits and vegetable supplements, each specific fruit and vegetable in Field of Greens is medically selected to support specific functions like heart health, liver and kidney health, immune system, and metabolism. So to help get you started, I got you 15% off your first order, plus get another 10% off when you subscribe for reoccurring orders. Visit fieldofgreens.com, use promo code GRANT. That's fieldofgreens.com, promo code GRANT. All right, folks, the Turning Point USA Action Conference held a poll on the Republican presidential candidates. We'll discuss those results. They're not really surprising, except maybe the second place finisher is. What does this all mean for the 2024 election? We'll have a Trump advisor next. Welcome back, everyone. You know, our friends over at Turning Point USA had a great event down in Florida this weekend. Real America's Voice was there for much of it. And, of course, they had a straw poll for the presidential race. No surprise, 85.7% of the vote came in for President Trump. This was tweeted out by Charlie Kirk, by the way. 85.7 for President Trump. I think what was interesting was, if you read all that, we're not going to read the whole tweet, but half of all the second place votes went to Vivek Ramaswamy. More than half, actually. So where does that leave Ron DeSantis? Not in a great spot. Where does that leave the others? Not in a great spot. But with all of this, with President Trump up, I mean, tremendously, right? Even in the national polls, he's around 50% of the vote with a whole bunch of challengers. Should President Trump debate? Should he enter the debate? This is what he said about that. Cut 2.
Is there anyone on that stage you see as potential running mate? as your VP?
Possibly, yeah. I mean, I think you have some good people on the stage, actually. I think you have some very talented people. I've been impressed by some of them.
That was not the one I was looking for, but I may have called the wrong number. The question is, should President Trump debate? We'll talk about who he should pick for vice president as well. Maybe let's do that first. I want to bring in now Bruce Lavelle to the program. Bruce Lavelle is I kept saying former Trump advisor. Bruce, you're like so close to the boss. You may not get paid right now, but you're still a Trump advisor, right?
Yeah, well, listen, I like being in my lane right now, Grant. And thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely. So what do you think? Let's start. I want to take these one by one here. Presidential, vice presidential pick. He says he's looking at some of these challengers. You thinking about this at all?
No, actually, I'm not, and Grant, because, I like to say this is kind of like a deja vu from 2015. Guys like myself and many of the grassroots guys that started from June 2015, it does have a similarity to it in terms of all the candidates that are jumping in. It has an organic feel about it. It has a real lean campaign machine running right now. The only difference is we're dealing with a true incumbent. And I like to say President Trump is the true incumbent. Like you said, there is a lot of talent on that stage. But quite frankly, remember, we have all the way until next year, all close to a convention, till, we decide who's the running mate. So we have plenty of time. He's doing very well by himself. But remember, all of those folks that were challenging President Trump, none of them were the VP selection. So just keep that in mind.
What do you make of Vivek Ramaswamy being, for the most part, he's like hanging close to DeSantis. And when you looked at adding up all the second place votes, he actually had more than half the second place votes in this Turning Point poll.
Yeah, well, he's a young guy. He's very wealthy. I think he's worth about $500 million. He talks really fast. He's got a good talk game, Grant. Let's just give it up. But he's the new kid on the block. I know there's some other stuff out there floating out there where he trained with Soros or something money related, whatever. You're going to get all of that stuff. But listen, this is all part. This is what makes this great republic cool, is vetting out and getting all the folks out there and everyone and the people, we the people, deciding on who we want to be our nominees or our congressional seats, or who we choose in our Senate seats, et cetera. So I call it, Grant, you and I are old enough to call he could be a one-hit wonder. You never know. So he's a new kid on the block. I think there's a group called New Kids on the Block too.
I will say this. He's a likable guy. And that goes a long way in politics, especially when you're a smart, likable guy. He seems to be that way. He's not going to take out the president right now, but I think he'll be around for something. All right, let me play this clip for you. This is about President Trump and his hiring. You and I have talked about this. I've actually talked to President Trump about this as well, as some of the mistakes he made when filling up the ranks inside the White House. This is President Trump talking about that very thing.
The mistake would be people. I wouldn't have put a guy like Bill Barr in. He was weak and pathetic. I wouldn't have put Jeff Sessions in. There are some people that I wouldn't have put in. Most people were good. But I had some people, we had Esper, I didn't like him. He was incompetent, I thought. We had other people I didn't like. Well, I didn't know the people. I know the people now better than anybody's ever known the people. I know the good ones, the bad ones, the dumb ones, the smart ones.
So will he hire somebody maybe to be the gatekeeper, Bruce, to make sure, hey, we're only getting real conservatives, no rhinos in there?
Yeah. Well, you got to remember, too, you're talking about President Trump who never had, any love for the D.C. connections in the circles. And he actually mentioned that. He just, he had a couple of business, some deals up there in the real estate, et cetera. But it wasn't something where he was comfortable hanging around, didn't have a lot of those D.C. connections and everything. So, with all respect, you got to remember that President Trump's from the hospitality world of building nice things for people and dealing with people and being gracious, as I call it, a gracious host. I've been around him many a times, and that's exactly what he is. But also, listen, we all fought each other in the primary. Okay, let's let's build this together. And I think that's sticking I call it the olive branch out, hopefully, and saying, hey guys, no, let's put this under the rug, or, water under the bridge, as what happened with Megyn Kelly. You see that's going viral, that he talked to her and they kind of, she kind of reconciled. So anyway, with that being said, there were some selections. You got all these politicos, especially now, that are egging on a lot of these candidates like Aisha Hudson's and all these other people to get on there. Oh, he's vulnerable. He's not going to make it. These are politicos in their ear. These aren't, mom and pop, grocery stores and grassroots business owners like myself that have customers and clients and part of the, the community and talking to people. These are special interest lobbying and pay to play type people who are in their ear saying, hey, we could raise this money, we could do that. So essentially, a lot of these guys in the race are like that. So a lot of that advice spewed over all into, around the president. And I think he, out of a great person that he is, trying to see good in someone's like, hey, if you say this person's good. So, there's a lot of moving parts. And real quick, and a lot of people don't know this, and Real America Voice viewers, you got to remember, I was presidential appointed. I was one step from cabinet. I was in the Small Business Administration and report to the White House. And let me tell you, we were operating at an administration with barely 40%. We never got a lot of our confirmations confirmed because we were constantly being blocked and hated on and blocked and discouraging good people that wanted to serve. So you got to remember what we were dealing with. It's not like we had full, all of our appointees filled, because the Senate would block us. They take their time on background, all kind of trickery. Yeah. So God, forbid, I hope this doesn't happen again. So to your point, Grant, real quick, I really believe, he will be in the White House again. It's not maybe, it's when he gets there again. He's a very intelligent person. He's built buildings. He's developed things all over the world. He doesn't build this way. He'll build it this way. So watch this on the second go around.
He's got the experience now, right? He's not going to surround himself with the GOP party elitists that he did early on in the campaign to lean on somebody. He's not going to do that again. I know him. He knows his way around Washington now. That same mistake isn't going to happen again. That's for sure. Bruce Lavelle, it's always great to see you, my friend. I appreciate you coming on tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Grant. God bless. Thanks.
All right, absolutely, folks. You too, Bruce. All right, folks, listen to me. Ron DeSantis, he's going around there bragging. He's bragging. Let me just play the clip for you, what he's bragging about.
They used to say, oh, the governor doesn't do retail campaigning. He's not going to be able to go to Iowa. And then, yesterday I'm out there doing events. We have 30, 40 people at some of these things, shaking hands, answering questions, doing all that.
Come on, Governor. 30, 40 people. Have you seen President Trump's rallies? Like 30, 40,000 people. Not 30 or 40. When I ran for Congress in the Dallas area, I could fill a room with 30 or 40 people. You're running for President of the United States. No offense, but that's a joke, man. A joke, and you're bragging about it. Please, if you're going to brag, fill a stadium with people, then you can brag about it. His campaign is faltering. He's firing staffers. He's got all kinds of problems. He's not raising the money that he wanted. My prediction is they're going to see this, and he's going to have to make a decision, in or out. And I think Ron DeSantis ought to make the decision. Save your political career, Ron, and get out. All right, if all home air purifiers are the same, folks, why did the U.S. Department of Defense select EnviroCleanse to protect and purify the air on board our Navy ships? EnviroCleanse is the new science in air purification, and now you can order one for your home. This is how you help stop colds and flu from taking your whole family down with these patented earth mineral technology plus hospital-grade HEPA filter inside there. EnviroCleanse destroys cold and flu viruses, COVID allergy, inflaming toxins, mold, and even more. And here's the EnviroCleanse promise: far fewer colds and allergies and better sleep. Visit ekpure.com and use code NEWS for 10% off your EnviroCleanse home air purification unit and free air quality monitor, plus fast, free shipping. That's $150 savings. That's ekpure.com, code word NEWS, ekpure.com, code word news. All right, millennials want to make misgendering a person illegal. A professor will join us next to discuss how we got here. I want to make something very clear. The conservatives' war on transgender mania is not about homophobia. It's about the radical left's quest to indoctrinate our children and come after the kids. It's about an ideology being pushed on our youth in America today. It's not about homophobia. It's also about common sense. Newsweek had an article out, which I saw, which says that more millennials say that we should be charging people with a crime. More millennials believe this for misgendering someone. Now, charging with a crime for misgendering someone? Take a listen to these loons. This is cut 3. Listen.
Gentle reminder. It doesn't matter who you're talking to. If you're fighting with somebody, having beef with them, or you're talking about someone, you should not be misgendering them. You should not be misgendering them. Just because someone's an doesn't give you a pass to be transphobic. Goodbye.
So, you see what I'm saying here? They want to make us criminals? Listen to this parent, cut 5.
I feel like I'm an open-minded person, but when it's like your son, asking you to do this, you know, and I think I wasn't thinking about her feelings at the time. I was just thinking about how are people going to react to it.
You were afraid, a little bit afraid for her.
Yeah, I was, and I still am afraid for her.
We continued to say no. You have to live as a boy. She would continue, you know, she's young. I'm sure she would have done it, but like we didn't want to be her first bully.
Do you see what I'm talking about here, folks? They want to make criminals out of us for calling a guy dressed as a girl a him. Well, joining me now from Campus Reform is Nick Giordano. He's been looking at these issues for quite some time now. Nick, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
What do you make of all of this? A crime to misgender someone?
Well, this is something that Campus Reform has been warning about since 2009, since we started. The attacks on free speech, the words have violence. When we examine it and try and understand what's going on, we're seeing a breakdown on college campuses where you have far left ideologues that want to indoctrinate the student body. And then you also have a lack of civics education being taught, where they don't teach about freedom of speech. They don't teach that hurt feelings don't equate to crimes. And that's what we have going on right now. We have entire generations that believe that offensiveness should be a crime. It goes well beyond the trans issue in the sense where over 50% of them want to see the First Amendment amended to ban offensive and hate speech without ever asking themselves who gets to determine what's offensive and what's hateful.
Nick, with the left's agenda, it's always the problem of who's making the decision. Even when it comes to guns, before the Supreme Court threw this May issue. Well, who's deciding whether or not I should get a permit? Who's deciding whether or not my speech happens to be offensive or not? Yet Michigan just passed a law that basically says intimidating someone over gender is now a felony. Well, who determines what intimidation is?
And that's part of the problem that we have in the United States. They throw out this vague terminology, pass laws about it, and nobody has the common sense to define what exactly does intimidation, what accounts for intimidation. So this is a real problem, and that's why we need to explore what's being taught not only on the college campuses, but in the K through 12 system as well. I mean, our founding fathers fought a revolution, and they sacrificed so much to give us freedom. And now we have entire generations that want to give that freedom away. And for what? They don't even know. And that's part of the problem. They've never been taught about liberty. They've never been taught about these concepts. And so they can't possibly defend what they don't know.
So, Nick, I love what Campus Reform does. It's so important to go reach these young people. But does it make you shake your head when you see a majority of millennials think you should be criminal charged for calling a he, and a her?
Well, no, not really. It doesn't. I see what's going on, but at the same time, I am optimistic. In my classroom, my students aren't radicalized. I teach at a community college, so they're much more open-minded. They deal with real-world issues every single day, whether they're working full-time or taking care of their children. And also in this poll, one of the silver linings and one of the shocking things was Gen Z actually didn't believe that we should criminalize misgendering someone. So it's amazing that the younger generation has a little bit of a better value for free speech than the millennials. At the same time, Gen Z has its own problems because they want to put surveillance cameras in people's homes.
We got problems all over the place. And you know what? I can look a lot of the liberals that are my age in their 50s, and they got problems too. So we're up against it. But thank you for being out there and fighting the fight. And Campus Reform's doing a great job of it as well. Nick Giordano, it is great having you on the program.
Thank you for having me. And everyone can check out campusreform.org.
Absolutely. I urge people to go there. All right, folks, don't forget, check out Birch Gold. Our friends over there can get you involved in gold. Right now, with all the chaos we see in the world, what you need to do is text America to the number 989898. Birch Gold can help you. They can even move some money into an IRA for you, a precious metals IRA. Birch Gold is the place to go when it comes to a safety, security, and portfolio protection move that only gold and precious metals can provide you. So here's how you do it. Again, text the number America. Text America to the number 989898 and have the folks at Birch Gold talk to you about if precious metals are right for you. All right, coming up after the break, Kamala Harris says she wants your kids to drink clean water and breathe clean air, but her proposal on how to do that is ridiculous. That's next.
Here are some of the headlines we are featuring today from your favorite news outlets at offthepress.com. As the national debt continues to grow under President Biden, the rate of borrowing is starting to scare fiscal hawks. A new report from the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget just revealed that the president has to borrow $63,000 a second and $2 trillion a year to cover the nation's debt. The Secret Service's inability to figure out who left cocaine near the Situation Room continues to bewilder Washington. Former President Donald Trump said he thinks they are being muzzled from telling the truth, and it turns out the agency didn't even ask first son Hunter about the drugs. Tucker Carlson got his first big ad deal for his new Twitter show. It's a $1 million buy from an anti-ESG app, and number 1 ranked Carlos Alcaraz defeated number 2 ranked Novak Djokovic over 5 sets Sunday at Wimbledon. For stories like these and more updates all day long from your favorite news outlets, go to offthepress.com.
Did you hear what Kamala Harris said last week? She said the quiet part out loud. Roll it.
When we invest in clean energy and electric vehicles and reduce population, more of our children can breathe clean air and drink clean water.